외할머니, maternal grandma. 외할머니 lived in 졸산 village at 찬평면, 담양군, 전라남도, and it was not easy to get there. First, you load the train down to Gwangju, which took several hours. Then you load the bus, which usually had farm animals on it, for about another hour, and got off a small store in the middle of nowhere. From there, you had to walk a few miles, and this last part was the hardest. There was no paved road, so you walked around rice paddies and on farm roads and footpaths. Despite the hardship, I went to see my 외할머니 often. She was very kind to me, and her home was very comfortable. She lived in a traditional Korean house with a raised main floor. On the main floor, you could open the doors and a cool breeze would rush in during the summer. Her house also had a well with ice-cold water. There was nothing that I did not like about her house. You could tie up a watermelon and lower it down the well to cool it. When you pulled it back up, it was sweet and cool. Being with my 외할머니 was a happy time to talk to her, goof around, and read books. I went down to 졸산 village during every school vacation. During the day, I often went to village creek to catch carp. When the market opened at 창평, I followed 외할머니 to the market, who could travel to the market with a large sack balanced on her head, hands-free. The grandfather clock in her house was as well as me, and it was so old it seemed miraculous that it could tell time accurately. I can still hear its tick-tock sound and the tick, though chimes every hour. It was a spring winding clock, and I liked winding it with a large key. 외할머니 would ask, "You want to feed it? Don't feed it too much. The spring will break." Her house was the lower building of a large traditional Korean house belonging to one of her relatives. The house had an upper building, a guest building, and the sadang, a shrine for ancestors. The bathroom was outside and uncomfortable. In the upper building, 3 generations of women, a mother, daughter-in-law, and daughter, lived without any man, which was common after the Korean War. One day, the mother living in the upper house gave me a hongshi, a mellowed red persimmon that she had saved in the garret. It was my first hongshi, and I have not forgotten it to this day. Love of Korea's southern coast. As my father was assigned to various port cities, I had a chance to visit other places in Korea that I might never have seen. He was an official at the Ministry of Finance, but he moved to the customs office when it became an independent, standalone organization. He was assigned to coastal cities where the customs office operated. Because I was in school in Seoul, I did not move with my parents and the siblings. Instead, I moved in with my uncle, who was a college student in Seoul, and moved with him from rented room to rented room. My parents and the siblings moved every few years, and I would visit during my school vacations. I got to visit Yeosu, Masan, and Busan. When my father worked at the customs office in Gimpo, Incheon, or Seoul, we all lived together in Seoul. But for most of my school years, he worked at various seaports. Out of all the port cities, Yeosu and Masan were the most impressive. My love of the southern coast started in those early days. In high school, I crisscrossed the southern coast with my friend Lee Ki-yeon. When we were in high school, the transportation system was rudimentary or non-existent. Ki-yeon and I took a train to Mokpo and rode a country bus from Mokpo to Haenam. We walked from there to Taehungsa Temple and walked back to Haenam. Took another country bus to the next town, walked somewhat, and so on. It was an arduous journey. The country bus broke down frequently in the middle of nowhere. The driver and his assistant would go underneath the bus and tinker underneath it, while the passengers and their hens, pigs, and other possessions waited. If we were lucky, the bus would start again. If we were unlucky, we'd wait in the middle of nowhere for hours for another bus to rescue us. During my college days, I spent a couple of weeks at Tuksum Island near Masan and traveled by boat to Komundo, Hansan-do, Naro-do, and many other islands. The southern coast is an archipelago with thousands of small islands, are peaceful and beautiful. I once had a crazy thought about someday buying an island there, but I didn't. Uncle, Samchon. As my father traveled among different seaports for work, I moved with my uncle to different rented rooms in Seoul. Because we lived together in a rented room, my uncle Seok-seung-yang became the biggest influence on me as a teenager. He was an economics major at Korea University. He was 6 feet tall and skinny. He looked smart and bookish, and he was indeed a deep thinker who liked music, fine art, literature, which he would patiently explain to me. After graduation and the military service, he went to study in Germany. Studying abroad at the time was rare, especially studying in Germany. He went to Tübingen University on a Catholic scholarship. I am not sure whether he became a Catholic because he received a scholarship or he got the scholarship because he was Catholic. In any event, he went to Germany as a Catholic, and my grandfather wasn't happy about it. My grandfather could not accept his son from a traditional Korean family becoming a Catholic. He also didn't like that my uncle wanted to study abroad after completing college in Korea. Despite that, my uncle went to Germany and told me a lot about it. As a result, I chose German as a second foreign language to study in high school and got interested in Germany and things German. One day he asked me to come along to a restaurant as he was preparing to go to Germany. This was not a traditional Korean restaurant, but a Western-style restaurant with forks and knives, and my uncle went over basic table manners with me. He came back from Germany after 2 years. He wanted to stay longer, but his scholarship was only for 2 years. Germans in the current town he lived in had never seen an Asian person. Whenever he went out, people followed him to stare at him. When he walked fast, to shake them up, they would follow him on bicycles. My uncle was depressed at being unable to continue his study in Germany, but my grandfather constantly berated him and pushed him to find a job. Pushed by my grandfather, my uncle soon took a teaching job at a countryside middle school and spent his life as a teacher. While I lived with my uncle, I received an allowance from parents. Once a month, I received a letter that began with "Look at this 동표," and my allowances was inside. Still, money was tight. I had the cheapest banchan side dish in my lunchbox every day, such as boiled beans and soy sauce or seasoned squid. I bought the student tickets for the bus and the streetcar each month. When I ran out of them, I walked to school. My sisters would soon be in the middle school and join me and our uncle in Seoul. I deeply appreciate my parents' efforts to keep all 6 of us in school in 2 groups, one in Seoul and one in whatever city my father was assigned to at the time. Their efforts must have been backbreaking. My parents' letters always contained the same message: study hard and write home again. I can still picture my parents' handwriting vividly. My father's handwriting in particular was superb. I tried to imitate his penmanship and practiced writing like he did. My mother's handwriting was also very smooth and flowing. Today, nobody writes much by hand at all, but in those days, people said that you could tell a lot about a person's character and personality by looking at his or her handwriting. Maternal relatives. In middle school and high school, when I went down to the countryside during my school breaks, I especially liked seeing relatives on my mother's side of the family, like my 외할머니, 외삼촌, maternal uncle, and Uncle Kwangshik living in Gungdong. My mother's uncle lived in Gungdong, Gwangju, and his third son, Kwangshik, was only a couple of years older than I was. Uncle Kwangshik was more of an older brother to me, and I liked him a lot. After graduating from high school, he was painting posters at a movie theater to help out his parents financially. I liked to visit his workplace, which was Keri Movie Theater in Gwangju. He worked in a large shed behind the theater. He painted actors and actresses on a large poster board much taller than himself, using tiny photos of them that he had in his hands. When he finished painting, the large poster looked exactly like the photos. It was simply amazing to me. Sometimes he would sneak me into the movie theater to watch a movie, which was an added pleasure of visiting him. We talked about music and the literature a lot. He liked the Plato song Only You, and I like that song even today. Later, he studied Korean traditional painting. He ultimately became a well-known painter in and around Gwangju and nationally, and his work was exhibited at the national exhibition. In addition to Uncle Kwangshik, I like to see my mother's aunt and her daughter Kyung-yang and Dihyun and sister Kapsuk. Looking back, I like to mingle with the Parks on mother's side more than the Yangs on my father's side. One year, I went down to Yosu to see my parents, but I had to have an emergency operation to remove a boil on my thigh. The operation was serious enough to keep me in the hospital for 10 days. But once I was released from the hospital, I was determined to go to Gwangju. I ignored everyone's advice to rest after my surgery and got on a train. I could manage a few steps at a time on a pair of crutches, but the walk from the Gwangju station to Gungdong was too much. I tried to walk very slowly, urging myself to move forward from one utility pole to the next. I would rest against each pole, but I simply could not continue. I realized that I needed medical attention and luckily found a clinic nearby. I staggered into the clinic. The doctor there told me that my stitches had ripped open and I needed some serious rest. I still have a big scar on my left thigh. I wanted to go see my relatives so much that I made a trip to Gwangju against my mother's advice and paid dearly for the mistake. 외삼촌, maternal uncle. I was closest to my maternal uncle, my mother's younger brother, among all of the relatives on my mother's side. He was proactive and action-driven. He was always jovial, laughed heartily, and took decisive action without hesitation. I tried to emulate him. I often asked myself, what would my 외삼촌 have done? He was a dutiful son to 외할머니 and very nice to his sister, my mother. He graduated from Seoul National University's College of Commerce, but finding a job in the 1950s was not easy, even for SNU graduates. It was a time when you had to have a connection to get a job. Connections were more important than your capabilities. Some companies, like banks, offered jobs that you could take an examination for, but my uncle failed to enter a bank repeatedly. Things did not go well for him, but he never lost his outward optimism, even though I knew he was hurting inside. As his last effort, he took the agricultural bank exam. He didn't want to stay in Seoul to wait for the result, and he went down to Gwangju. He asked me to go to the bank when the results were not announced because the bank would post a large piece of paper on the front gate listing the names of those who passed the exam. The community across the street from the bank was a post office. My uncle asked me to send me a telegram from there with the result. Telegraph was the only method of quick communication at the time, but to get the cost down, you had to use as few words as possible. My uncle came up with our code. If it passed, I should write, "Come to Seoul, 동표가." If he failed, I should write, "Coming to Gwangju today, 동표부." In Chinese characters, "ga" can mean yes and "bu" can mean no, so it was a clever use of language. In the event that 외할머니 received the telegraph while uncle away, she wouldn't readily grasp our code. That day, I did as my uncle and I had agreed. At the AG Bank, my uncle's name was not listed. With a heavy heart, I walked over to the post office and sent the 동표부 message. Even today, when I'm in that area, I remember this episode. Thankfully, Samson did not give up. He later passed the exam to become a local government official. He eventually became a county magistrate and moved around various countries. In Cholanamdo, when my father passed away, my uncle was the magistrate of Changhung County. My mother and I stayed at his magistrate's residence in Changhung, which was not far from the Posong family cemetery. Ears opened to music. As I grew up, I developed a love of music. In the 1960s. British and American pop songs, Italian canzone, and French chanson flooded into Korea. You could hear this music on the radio, in tea rooms and the radio repair shops along the streets. I like these Western songs, but I like the classical music better. I don't know how it started, but I began listening to opera arias first, then overtures, then concertos, and finally symphonies and chamber music. I liked all genre of classical music. I played the LP record of 10 tenors every day and listened to Mario Lanza and Josie Jordan. Among soprano singers, Maria Callas was the best. While living with my uncle, I had my father's old electric phonograph in our rented room. Because we both liked classical music, we listened to LPs together. The electric phonograph was our household's most treasured possession at the time, and the LPs I bought by saving my allowance were also very precious. The electric phonograph was equipped with vacuum tubes, and tubes burnt out frequently. Every neighborhood had at least one radio repair shop in those days to repair radios and electric phonographs. Every repair shop placed a loudspeaker or two in front of the store and blasted music to advertise. Sibelius Finlandia boiled my blood when I first listened to it at a young age. The title Zigeuner Eisen was fascinating. The composer's name, Sarasat, and the performer's name, Joshua Heifetz, also sounded exotic and fascinating. At the impressionable age, who wouldn't be impressed by Sprache, Zarathustra, and captivated by the introduction? When I heard alias like Besti la Cegelena Mania and La Donna Immobile, I wanted to sing them myself, but obviously they were well out of my range. In the 60s, there might be one or two opera performances in Korea a year, making each performance a can't-miss event. I couldn't go wrong, so coaxed Woo Ok-kyung into going with me. We saw Carmen, La Boheme, Cavalleria, and Rusticana together. The quality of the performance at the time was amateurish, like an elementary school production. However, staging customers and live acting and singing was so exciting that we fell in love with every performance. Decades later, Ok Young and I went to the opera at Seoul Performing Arts Center, and those performances were high quality and world class. Nonetheless, we still remember the old performances we saw together fondly. My love of music was influenced a lot by my father, just as my love of writing was influenced by him. My father played the mandarin especially well, like a professional, and the guitar also. He always had an electric phonograph at home. After the war, we had the electric phonograph and the SPs at home in Gwangju. You need to use a sharp needle to play SPs, and those needles needed to be replaced frequently. Because we didn't have enough new needles, my uncle and I sharpened the blunted needles on rock in order to use them again, despite my father's warnings that doing so would ruin the SPs. Every time I went down to my parents' house, the house was full of music. As technology advanced, the LPs replaced the SPs, and the new electric phonograph or stereo sounded like a real performance. In Yosu, my father had a Japanese stereo at home. It was like a magic box producing magnificent sounds. My father also bought a original piece of La Traviata. Original LPs were prized because Korea did not produce quality music records. At the time, our Korean-made classical music records were copies. Because my father had the original LPs of La Traviata, I knew the entire opera, not just the arias like Brindisi, a drinking song, and the Provenza. I was mesmerized by the drama and the music, and I fell in love with the Verdi. The entire opera is over 2 hours long, but I played it repeatedly and loudly every day. I'm sure it must have been a headache to the rest of my family, but I was immersed in the music. After that, I tried to listen to entire operas rather than a single aria or chorus.